بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. In the previous talks, I had actually spoken about the different roles that the Imam has, and today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, I'm going to speak about the different challenges that he actually faces concerning those particular roles and related to all of those roles. The first one, but firstly, before we begin discussing those challenges, I think it's very important for us to actually define what unique aspects the Imam actually has to face and the unique aspects that he actually has to deal with. So, one of the first things is that the expectations. There are a number of unrealistic expectations that the community holds the Imam against, and that would be specifically concerning his availability. So, every single person in the community, إلا من رحمه الله, except those, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given guidance as mercy upon. They expect the Imam to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And from day one, it is very important for every Imam to define that this is something that is completely unfair. Regardless of the job, regardless of the need, regardless of the time, an individual cannot be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If he is like then that somebody's right is being taken, whether it be his personal right, whether it be his family's right, whether it be his work rights, or whether it be the rights of the community on that individual. So it's very important for, number one, first and foremost, the Imam to understand that this is something that is unfair, and secondly, for the community or the employing body to understand that this is something that is not that is an unrealistic expectation from him. And one of the reasons that this actually comes about is because one of the unique positions of the Imam is that the masjid is actually both his workspace and his social space. So you'll find that even in his free time he's going to come to this masjid, or he's going to bring his children to the masjid, or they might come for dinners or get-togethers or other social community activities that happen in the masjid that aren't part of his work obligations. That social time can be work time, but it cannot be something that is demanded from him, meaning that he has a choice in partaking in those social activities or not partaking in them. It is not something that he should be obligated to do. Those events that he is obligated to attend need to be clearly defined by the masjid board, need to be defined by the community, but he's not obligated to attend every single social event or every single activity that is happening in the masjid. At the end of the day, this really is negotiable space. If he wants to partake in certain things and he doesn't want to partake in certain things, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That he is a employee at the end of the day, and he has a choice in how to negotiate what it is that he feels is necessary for the community and how much time he can give to the community. Which brings us to the next question. Okay, how does that defined now? And this is something I like to boil down into what we call accessibility versus availability. An imam always needs to be accessible. This is something that is very important, something that I truly believe is fundamental, but he doesn't necessarily always have to be available. And we have very similar standing or a similar situation with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where you would have Bedouins and you would have other people actually coming and knocking at his door or calling out to him saying, "Ya Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam," and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he just wouldn't answer them. Just to tell them and to dictate to them, like, no, this is his personal time and this is not a time where he's able to cater to anyone. So what would happen is they would go away and obviously they would come back, just like many times today. And it is not something that should be looked down upon. This is not something that should be taken away. If an imam doesn't answer his phone, and if imam doesn't answer his door, and if imam doesn't open his door, even if he's sitting in his office, that is his prerogative, as long as he has dictated publicly that this is not his professional time. If that is his personal time, he is more than welcome to use his personal time as he pleases, as he wishes. If he wishes to cater to someone at that time, again, that's his choice. If he does not want to cater to someone at that time, again, that is his choice. But he should have public office hours so that people do know when he is available, and that way, this time they know that they will not be turned away from him. So it's very important for the imam to maintain that accessibility via contact points. Now, that these contact points is going to be based up to the individual and up to the imam. He can have a business number, which is something separate from his personal number. Again, something I encourage all imams to have. In that he can take calls, he can take text messages or SMSs. He should have a business email, again separate from his personal email, and in general try to be around the times of the salawat. And it is at these points, after the salawat, and I will never tell an imam, you can't tell someone like, okay, please go away. This is not, I'm not catering to anyone, I'm not dealing with anyone at this time or at this particular time. But what he can do is he can actually do intake. He can do intake via phone, he can do intake via text, or he can do intake via email, and even after these times after the salawat. Now, it's upon the imam to make a judgment call. If it is a very quick question, my recommendation in order to build rapport and in order to build trust with the community, I would highly suggest that you answer and you deal with that question immediately. If it is something small, something short, something you can, take care of within, I would say, about a 5 minute time period. If it is something that's longer, it is at that point I would encourage the person to make an appointment. Say, okay, hey, listen, this is something that's going to require a little bit of time. I'm actually busy right now. Why don't you come in at X time? And this is something that either you can dictate or you can utilize some type of appointment system if you have one in place to kind of deal with that and to deal with that issue. But again, it's very important for people to feel that they're not neglected. It is very important for people to feel that you are always accessible. And again, not always available. People want to feel important and they want to feel like they can access you as the imam at any point in time. And this isn't something that we should deny. Again, as imams, we should always try to make ourselves as accessible as possible. But at the same time, it's very important for us to define our personal boundaries. If we are giving that person time, that means that we are taking away time from something else, either, again, whether it be my personal time or whether it be family time or whether it be preparation time, for other community activities that might be going on. So it's, again, very important for us to be accessible, but it's also very important for us to define our boundaries. Which brings us to the issue of weekends. How does the imam have a weekend? And this is sometimes something, again, that becomes very difficult to digest for many communities. That why does an imam need a weekend? Well, just like any job, he needs time where he needs to get away to spend time with his family. If the imam is not happy, if the imam is constantly stressed, if the imam is constantly worked, then he will not be able to serve the community appropriately, just like in any job. If an employee is unhappy, then he will not be able to fulfill his duties toward that particular job, and in this case, being the imam. So my general proposal, usually for this situation, is that the weekend for an imam will be something like a Monday or Tuesday, or a Monday and Tuesday type setup, because this allows the accessibility of him to be greater. Usually, people are free on the weekends, so they want access to him on Saturday and Sunday. But this way, he actually has a weekend, which is Monday and Tuesday. And again, this doesn't mean he stops praying. Obviously, he's still a Muslim during his weekends, but he just will not have office hours, for example, or he will not set appointments in those particular days, or he will not be available for professional meetings in those particular days. This is how it's to be defined, but it doesn't. It means that the people should not expect him for the salawat on those days because he has other things that he needs to take care of. Maybe he's taken his family away on his particular weekend. But again, it's his weekend. How he wants to spend it and what he wants to do with it, that's his prerogative, because at the end of the day, it is a weekend. Um, so there might be weekends where he stays home during that weekend, and he's just coming for a few of the salawats in the masjid, depending on the distance from the masjid, or he has to run a few errands and he can't make all of those salawats of jama'ah. Again, which is fine, is his prerogative. There's no issue with that, and there's even an allowance for it. Shut on. Another issue might come in then. Okay, when is he to spend time with his family? Because if Monday and Tuesday is his weekend, how is he going to spend the regular Saturday, Sunday weekend with his family? Usually, this is when the children have off. Most people do not have Mondays and Tuesdays off. A solution to that is that he takes one Saturday, Sunday weekend out of the month, meaning that he has 3 Monday, Tuesday weekends, and then one Saturday, Sunday weekend out of the month. And this is something that obviously can be arranged with the community on which Saturday, Sunday weekend he wants to take out. But again, there are ways to kind of navigate that. It's upon him to see what will work out best for him and what will work out best for his family. The series of challenges have to do with the roles that he has. So again, we had mentioned it previously, but the ritual roles, these are the ones that people tend to spend a lot of focus on. And we have to look at, okay, who is it that actually focusing on these particular issues? Who wants him to be there for every salah? Who wants him to give every khutbah? Who wants him to give every khatara? Who wants him to give every single talk? This is usually people who have the image of the archetypal imam in their head, and they expect, like, okay, this is what we have in our mind, so this is what needs to be fulfilled. But like I had mentioned before, even if the imam is not there, or even if they had not hired an imam yet, those services are still being taken care of. They're still being handled without an imam. So he should just be there to kind of subsidize or kind of support those roles, not be the main crutch of the community concerning them. So it's important for him to kind of delegate many of those activities. Whether they be the regular salawat, whether they be the khutab, whether they be the khataras, whether they be the general talks, all of these things can be delegated to other members in the community. And again, it's a good way to bring community involvement. And when the imam leaves, because not every imam is going to stay in every position, either because he's going to find a better position somewhere else, or he might find more pay, or because of family needs or whatever, he'll move. Or obviously, what is inevitable for all of us, he'll pass away at some point. So if one of these two things do happen, it's very important for the community to be able to continue on without him, and to not treat the imam as a crutch, but to treat him as a support. And that's something that's very important, because when you remove the crutch from an individual, or you remove the crutch from a community, then the community tends to break and it tends to fall apart. And that's not something that's not the role that the imam should play. Within the organization itself, the imam will tend to have, and he will face, a number of problems. The first one being the relationship with the board. That tends to be the most challenging. It tends to be the most difficult one. Many boards will treat him as an employee, and they will limit his scope. And a lot of that has to do with a number of factors, which I will talk about and which I will get into, inshallah. But I remember a friend of mine, he had actually come up to me, and I said, I'm an imam at a particular masjid. And he said to me, he's like, it was a very eloquent way of putting it. He said, "So are you in a handcuff situation or ball and chain situation? Handcuff where I just can't move at all, and a ball and chain situation where I have limited movement in what I can do and what I can't do." And a lot of this has to do with a lack of vision, either from the perspective of the imam, or a lack of vision from the perspective of the board. And there are many boards who do fear that the imam will monopolize the power in the organization, and because of that fear, they try to limit the powers that they actually grant him and which they actually give him. And this is something, honestly, it is valid. There are situations where I have seen where the imam does monopolize all the power, and he was not ready for that power, and he abused his powers, unfortunately. And it just didn't lead the community down the path it needed to go. And then there are opposite situations where the board abuses their power and they limit the imam extremely, even though the imam is very competent, very qualified in actually leading the community appropriately. Um, and the other one is the definition of the imam, how the imam's to be defined, how they view the imam. So again, if we have somebody who has this view of the archetypal imam in their mind, they basically see the imam as someone who is going to reinforce their cultural values. And this doesn't always have to be a negative thing. If the imam actually knows how to play off of that, he can use these cultural values as a tool that can actually play in his favor. It's very important to understand what those cultural values are. And it's very important for an imam in whatever community he is to kind of be versed in what that culture is, so that he can kind of use them as tools to get to the means, or get to the ends, use it as a means to get to the ends that he is trying to get to, as of course, as long as it is permissible. So a good balance for this power dynamic between the shura, or between the board and the imam, is to actually make him a non-voting member in that organization. And then what that actually does is it allows him to be part of the day-to-day discussions that are happening in the masjid, some of the problems that they're facing, and he can actually give his input. He can give his opinion. He's the spiritual guide. He can provide workshops. There are a number of things that he can actually do to empower that particular shura without having a bureaucratic effect, meaning that he doesn't have a vote. At the end of the day, he's more than welcome to say what he wants. He's more than welcome to share his ideas. He's more than welcome to present solutions to the problems that the community faces. But because he's not a voting member, he will not, in actuality, have a direct effect on what is going on. And again, this is a good way of kind of maintaining that power balance between these two parties, between the board and between the imam. I think another problem, or another issue that really comes into play that we overlook, is that many imams are in a position where their roles and responsibilities are just not defined. So it's very important that they are listed out. And many people will be like, okay, well, how can you quantify something that is not quantifiable? This is something that you're talking about, a non-quantifiable thing. Like, how am I supposed to judge a imam's knowledge? Or how am I supposed to judge, his piety or his character? Well, the simple answer is because you're not supposed to judge those things. Those things are not for you. You are not in a position, both knowledge-wise, just knowledge-wise and religiously, that you can be in a position where you can now judge someone who studied for the past, 8 to 15 years, depending on the individual. Obviously, some as few as 4, some as many as 15, 20, even. So this is not what's asked to be judged, but there are certain things that, what we call KPIs, or key performance indicators, on what it is that the imam is doing. Okay, what programs has he started? How many programs has he actually delegated? How many more people now do we have involved in the masjid in whatever his realm is? So if his realm is limited, okay, let's look at within that realm. How many more people has he empowered? How many more people has he brought in? How is his relationship? How many people are coming to see him now every week? These type of things, they definitely can be judged, because now you have something that is quantifiable. You can actually count what is going on. If his khutbah are effective, okay, how many more people have we drawn into the community? And obviously, that's not one aspect of it. He's taking care of the religious, educational aspect of it, and obviously there is a big social aspect of it that sometimes he just doesn't have a hand in. So all of these factors, they are definitely quantifiable, and it's very important for every single community to decide and determine how to actually determine those KPIs. What are those key performance indicators, and how do we figure those out? What are we looking for in Imam? So, does he have a relationship with the mayor? And that's a simple yes or no question. There's nothing there. Like, how good that relationship is irrelevant. Because the idea is that he actually has tried to establish one, or what are some workshops that he's taken to help our name in the community, or how many conferences has he participated in, under our umbrella, and that we are actually continuing to pay him to attend that conference so that he can promote our masjid in that. Because the reality is, many people take pride in their imam when he's speaking on a public forum, or when he's speaking at a statewide event, or even a national event. People will say, hey, that's my imam, or that's our imam, taking pride in him vicariously. So, regardless of what these roles and responsibilities are, I think it's something that it's critical that they're all written out, because at the end of the day, if there's any type of problem in the masjid, you can't come and run to the imam and be like, okay, we're gonna have to let you go. Like, why? Well, because we don't have a balance in our budget this year. Like, what does that have to do with me? I had nothing to do with balancing the budget. Or, the masjid was not vacuumed appropriately. Like, again, what does that have to do with me as an imam? If those roles and responsibilities are not written out, there is no sense of accountability, or there can be abused sense of accountability, meaning that you will hold him responsible for everything and anything. And this is something, again, to protect both parties. It is not just meant to protect the imam; it is also meant to protect the board. Because when the people come and they say, "Okay, why did you hire this guy?" they will actually have a list of reasons, saying, "Okay, well, we hired him because of A, B, and C." Um, and if they say, "Well, he's not doing this," and be like, "Well, that's not the reason we hired him." So it's very important. Again, it protects both parties in this situation, and I think is something that is generally overlooked, but it is something that is very critically important. The Imam, like we had mentioned in the first lecture, it actually translates in, or people look to him as a leader. But it's very important for us, again, to define a, that sense of leadership in it's a perception. And what is that perception? What does that actually mean? And in according to my understanding and my experiences, I would say that he is actually the spiritual guide for the community, meaning that he himself might not have any management experience. He himself won't have any architectural or engineering experience, or even any design experience. So he might not have an idea on how to actually um, make that happen on the ground reality and at the ground level, because he doesn't have any type of business background, or he doesn't have that type of practical knowledge to really do those things. But he does know about halal and haram. He does know how to interact with people. He does know, because of the nature of the work that he's at the masjid, he has an idea of what the community needs are. Getting his input in these things, I think, is something that's very critical, and it can actually help move the community in the direction that it needs to move. He's there to set the boundaries for that community on how to kind of act with each other. And you have different types of communities. You have some liberal communities, and you have very conservative communities, and both of these have their challenges. The liberal community, it's much more difficult to rein in than it is to kind of push the conservative one. So there are different challenges that every imam will make, and that's going to depend on the community that he's in. Another thing that we tend to forget, not as the imams, well, even as the imams, but even as the community members or hiring members in the shura, that just because an individual graduated from an Eastern university, or just because he has, like, he's done a degree, or just because he has a mufti or alim, degree or whatever, it's not necessarily that he's actually good at it. A person studies to become a medical doctor for 8 years, but it doesn't mean that he's going to come out and be a good doctor. And I'm sure many of us have experienced that I've gone to someone and I just felt he was a terrible doctor, even though I know he put the time and the effort into it. It's the same thing with the imam. Just because somebody has an Eastern degree, it doesn't mean that he's muttaqi now, automatically. It's very possible that he's a bad imam when he comes out. He just doesn't have the skill set. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said about us as Muslims, he said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi din." That whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends good for, then He gives them understanding of the religion. And not everybody has that understanding. It's very simple, very basic, and it's really unfortunate. But that's a real reality. And we really need to have a certain set of qualifications that we look for when we look for in Imam, especially in terms of how to deal with each other. So, and I think the other thing that the Imam forgets, and something that I've stressed on time and time again, is where and how to delegate roles. And this is something even many shuras fail at. They just don't know how to delegate their power. Everybody's all looking into consolidating their power and trying to keep the power within their hands. And even the Imam, sometimes he's afraid to let other people take particular roles because he's afraid of his job or afraid of losing his job. But my argument is like, no, that is the fundamental of your job. You are supposed to empower the community. You are supposed to push people to advance. You are supposed to allow people to grow into these positions. Even myself, I'm not particularly old, but I'm still looking for someone to shadow me here at this masjid because I want to prepare someone to. There has to be succession planning, and this is something that we as Muslims have failed at, both managerially and spiritually. So we don't have many imams who have shadow imams. Many of the boards, they don't have people who they're preparing. The board members, they will continue serving on the board until they pass away. And jazakumullah khair for all the work that they've done until this point. But has to be a point where the torch is actually passed, and I argue that point should be when these individuals are healthy. Um, there's a lack of understanding also of nonprofit management. What does that mean? Does that actually entail? I was part of an international organization, and I still work with them. I still work with everyone, alhamdulillah. But I actually went down and I sat in, and there was about 20 people sitting there, and I asked every single one. I said, "What is the fundamental difference between a for-profit and nonprofit?" And people are going around volunteerism. One doesn't get profit. One doesn't do this. One doesn't do that. And I was really shocked. And I just went around. I was like, no, all these answers are absolutely wrong. The fundamental difference is how profit is distributed. A nonprofit organization, it reinvests back in itself, and a for-profit divides the money amongst the shareholders. And this is the fundamental difference. This is the only difference. It has nothing to do with volunteerism. Has nothing to do with, not earning any money, which I found extremely shocking. Because if you don't have money, how's an organization supposed to run? But again, this is something that is very important for us to understand. So, and this has to do more with the board side than it has to do with the imam side. But with the board side, they should be looking into bringing people in who are going to act more like CEOs than people who are going to handle the day to day, because it's very important for them to understand what a nonprofit organization is. It is very important for them to understand how to set KPIs. It's very important for them to understand how to delegate power and how to delegate authority. It's very important for them to know how to learn and how to trust people. It is very important for them to understand what fund acquisition actually means. What does it mean to actually earn money for the organization, that these organizations can move forward and they can expand, both financially, economically and socially. So it's very important to understand what that role is from a managerial standpoint, and how to complement that role with the imam from the spiritual side, and how these two entities can actually work together within an organization to help move the community forward. You will have some imams who do have that managerial skill set, and that's something, again, that kind of that can be taken advantage of. There's no doubt about that. You might have some people in the shura or in the board who might be Islamically educated. Again, that's something that should be taken advantage of. But it's very important that each entity kind of work within its own sphere, and there are going to be elements that overlap, and it's very important to understand where those elements overlap and how to look forward and how to move forward. Another thing is the definition of roles, and what kind of jobs are there actually available at the masjid, and what can individuals do. And inshallah, I want to talk about this more next time, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, so I look forward to seeing you all then. Jazakumullah khair. والله أعلم وصلى الله على خير خلق نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.